Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Energy Technology Podcast. Today, we have with us Manas Patak, and he is the CEO and co-founder of EarthEn. EarthEn provides thermomechanical energy storage based on supercritical CO2, operated in a closed loop to provide long-duration energy storage in a low-cost, safe, and with a small footprint. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I think when we start this, we talk about storage, and it's been a topic for the last few months of like how long is long duration. And so if you could kind of clarify for us where EarthEn really lives in that cycle and why that's increasingly important.
Yes, I mean, for us, we can do from 4 to over 100 hours, but long duration per DOE definition is 10 plus hours. And then there's a new liftoff report that recently came out, I think a few months back from DOE that further sort of drills down into the durations. So there's a band from 10 to 36 hours, and then which is mostly intraday. So and then 36 to over 160 hours. So we being a flexible energy storage, we can provide anywhere from 4 to over 100 plus hours, which means up to 160 hours. However, we're going to go to market initially with 8 to 10 hours of duration because that's where we're seeing our customers are wanting the most.
Yeah. And you've developed a solution that's thermomechanical, uses CO2. I'll be honest, when I first read your brief a year and a half ago, I was thinking, is this carbon capture and storage? It is not carbon capture and storage. This is a mechanical solution that's really, in many ways, an evolution on top of compressed air capture. So is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's thermomechanical using carbon dioxide in a closed loop.
Yeah.
You can think of this as compressed air, but CO2.
Yep.
But not just CO2, supercritical CO2, which is the best form of CO2 to use in order to provide a thermomechanical energy storage. When we do a thermomechanical combined hybrid, we get the efficiencies that cannot be achieved by pure thermal solutions. So our round trip efficiency, meaning electron in and electron out, is 78%, which is now vetted by a third party. And that we can only achieve when we are thermomechanical.
Yeah, and that exceeds some battery technologies.
Well, that exceeds many technologies. Yeah. I think lithium-ion batteries are hanging around 80% or so, so close to lithium-ion batteries. But typical long-duration energy storage solutions tend to be less efficient. 60s is what they try to achieve for. So us beating the 75% mark is actually good for our value proposition.
Yeah. And you said some technical things there, like so supercritical CO2. Remind me what that is.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's basically a form of CO2 when you push the CO2 to higher pressures and higher temperatures. In this case, it's around the critical temperature of CO2 is 32 degrees C. And I think the critical pressure is around 1100 PSI. So when you push the CO2 phase above these 2 points in temperature and pressures, you get what's called supercritical CO2, supercritical phase of matter. I mean, you can have solid, liquid, and gas. This is kind of like fourth phase. The best part of supercritical is it behaves like a liquid for certain things and like a gas for certain things. So it very beautifully, we are able to leverage the thermodynamic properties of CO2 when it's in supercritical phase to our advantage and be able to store energy in a closed loop cycle because of that.
I definitely misunderstood that. and I guess it requires a very conscious control of the system to maintain that phase.
Yeah, I mean, you
take a moment.
Yeah, you gotta just stay above the critical points, so critical pressure and critical temperature. As long as you're staying above those T and P, you will be in supercritical phase. So if you look at our cycle in a pressure temperature plot, we are always kind of above the dome, which is like the phase boundary. So we are always operating in supercritical phase. When it's in supercritical phase, it's at higher densities, which translate to higher energy density. So which translates to a lower footprint on the ground. So that's why we could ship our systems on a flatbed truck. We have a smaller footprint of the batteries, much like how people buy lithium-ion batteries today. Unlike other long-duration energy storage, which looks like a huge power plant, we do not look like that because of higher fluid density and higher energy density.
So when that battery pack is being used, is that supercritical CO2 being converted?
Yeah, so fundamentally, what we are doing is we have a lower pressure phase of supercritical CO2 and a higher pressure phase. What we're doing is we are toggling CO2 from a lower P to a higher P and vice versa. And in this toggle between a high P and a low P, there's of course temperature that goes up and down. But during the toggle, we charge the battery and discharge the battery. So when we compress to higher P, that's charging, right? We compress it, that's charge, and then we let it expand. It's the discharge phase. So it goes back to the lower pressure phase.
Got it.
Okay.
And it's the special properties of CO2 that lets you do that versus other molecules.
Right. So, I mean, if you look at compressed air is great, but it just requires a lot of space. You have to have caverns or huge tanks to store air, which is very dense, right? I mean, the air is around us as very dense fluid. Now, you can have a higher density air when you do liquefy the air. That's called liquefied compressed air. They call it LCAS. But liquefying air requires cryogenic temperatures, which is very energy hungry process. In CO2, you can liquefy it at room temperatures. Provided you are at high enough pressures, you can liquefy CO2 at like 30 degrees C, which in Texas is kind of like, ambient.
Room temperature.
Yeah.
It's within a reach of room.
So now you can have liquid-like thing sitting next to you at room temperatures. So we don't have to waste energy in liquefying CO2.
And you get that volume benefit, which allows you to get that power density.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why CO2 is the ideal fluid for us to do a compressed thermomechanical energy storage.
Got it. And if I remember from compressed air, some of the challenges includes the heat generation from compression, and managing that ends up being a big focus of the engineering. But I imagine with using kind of a supercritical process, it's the supercritical liquid gas phase absorbs a lot of the heat, or it allows you to manage it more effectively.
Yeah, I mean, so there is some heat of compression, which is actually desired because when you have the heat of compression being produced, we do not let it out. So we are not rejecting any heat. We're trying to have almost zero heat rejection. That's what allows us to have higher efficiency. So any heat of the compression actually goes into our thermal energy storage systems. So we have TES, thermal energy storage, that stores heat, and the heat of compression is stored in that.
Got it.
So it is there, but it does not affect us. In fact, it helps us because it's in a closed loop cycle. If you're storing the heat and bringing it back into discharge phase, all in all, you don't hit your efficiencies as much.
Okay.
So what kind of batteries are you most competing with?
So, we of course compete with lithium-ion batteries because of the problems that they have, such as they can't do long durations because, if you want to go long durations with the lithium-ion batteries, you have to stack many of those systems, which is uneconomical and longer durations. In our systems, we have power and energy decoupled from each other, which means for a specific megawatt, you can increase the duration by just filling more CO2 in. So it becomes an incremental cost of just material to go longer durations for EarthEn, while in lithium-ion case, you have to just buy more systems because the power energy is coupled from each other. So we compete with lithium-ion in short durations, 4, 6, 8 hours. Then, of course, there are I think last I checked, 300 startups in long durations, energy storage. And so we compete with all of them. If you look at certain technologies, gravity, pure thermal systems, some other flow batteries, which have their own challenges, being very acidic, huge tanks filled with acidic material that is not very environment friendly. So flow batteries are also our competitors. Yeah.
Got it.
So you came to the US in 2013 from India to do your PhD.
Yeah.
Was this idea that kind of developed there, or is this something that, over the years you've thought about and now brought to light?
Yeah, it was definitely not developed in PhD. What happened in PhD was a good training in thermodynamics during my PhD in chemical engineering. Being a chemical engineer, you are kind of exposed to, some of these fundamentals of fluids, including thermodynamics and fluid flow, etc. As a good training there, specifically my thesis work, which was around understanding the thermodynamics of oil and gas within the nanopores of shale rocks in the kerogen, which is an organic material found in shale rocks, gave me a good understanding of how to look at the thermodynamic properties of the fluids. That understanding came handy when we were looking at energy storage solution and developing one. Which is almost, I think, 5 years after I graduated from PhD, when energy transition was happening in front of our eyes. I was working for a huge semiconductor company out of Silicon Valley, but I was still talking to my PhD peers and my professors, and energy transition was happening in front of us, and we could see, well, the cheapest electron that you can get today is from solar, and they are also the greenest. So why the transition can't happen? And it turns out that you can get the cheapest and greenest electron from solar, but they are not available 24/7 because you get it only when sun is shining. And the same goes for wind. So the energy storage was the nut uncracked in the entire transition. And that's what led to the genesis of finding an energy storage solution. And as a chemical engineer, I just had to look back into my training as a chemical engineer and try to figure out a way to do that. So with oil and gas background and thermodynamics understanding, we put together this thermomechanical system using CO2 that very beautifully plays with the thermodynamic properties of CO2 and delivers you a best-in-class energy storage system.
Yeah. And if I recall, you were working on this through an MBA, or was it part of an MBA program?
Right. So as an engineer, back in the day, when I was finishing my PhD, I actually had a product called Rock on a Chip, where you use semiconductor processes and print rock geometry on a chip, and then perform some fluid flow simulations, like in real experiments, before you go drill a well. So I thought, this is a phenomenal product. This is going to just sell, right? And then turns out, university did end up filing some patents on it, but turns out, nope, building a product is one thing, but building a company is altogether a different ballgame. So I took that learning when I came out of PhD, and there has always been a fire in the belly around entrepreneurship, just wanting to do entrepreneurship. So it was there with me that I don't know how to build a company. So with me working in the corporate for 6 years across 10 different roles, spanning engineering management, all the way to sales and marketing, I understood enough about how the corporates work and how companies function. And then to put nail on the coffin, did my MBA. And to just formally understand the business side of thing as an engineer, with, of course, focus on entrepreneurship. During the times in MBA, EarthEn was founded. So the intent of going into an MBA school was that I walk out with a startup.
So would you recommend an MBA to people wanting to be entrepreneurs?
No, it's not needed. Because guess what? One thing I learned out of MBA is, how do you build a company? Answer is people.
Yeah.
It's all about people. The first check that came into the company, they didn't even ask. They understood technology, but didn't look under the hood, right? So it's all about people. That's what I understood. So, if you are hearing this podcast, just understand that and skip your B school.
But are there, to defend the B school, but I didn't get an MBA, so I'm like the one here looking at this. Do you think you would have made the leap without going to B school?
No, I think it gave me more confidence in all facets of the business, like, reading a balance sheet, putting together a pro forma documents. Those things, these are skills that you can very easily learn outside B school, but it's part of the B school process as well. So, if you don't have an idea right now or a company that you're working on, then go do a B school.
If you can afford it.
if you can afford it and if you don't have an idea, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The problem with going to a B school to go to a startup is afterwards you will not be able to afford it until you get funded. So there's that double-edged sword there.
Yeah, I think, I definitely there are pros and cons. And I think a lot of people do MBAs when they're in that transition phase where like they really want to be an entrepreneur, but don't have that complete confidence yet. And maybe that MBA provides you that space, that confidence, perhaps even the network to say, you know what, I'm ready to do this.
Yeah, network is great. I mean, that's how we started. I mean, we are sort of a ASU spinoff. Arizona State University is where we went to. The business school, and the first check came from ASU, as you know, and the first connections came from ASU. So networking is a great deal of business school. However, if you already have a company and you're already working on, you just don't have time to do a B school. Like in the second year of my B school, I was like, when do I get over with this thing? Yeah. Because I need to run a company and I don't have time. I took all my classes online. They were all useful, don't get me wrong, but I just don't have time to juggle between a B school and building a company. So I tried to minimize all my B school things in the second half of the program and focus on the company. Yeah.
No, I was just staying on that topic. I think there have been news recently that universities across the board are losing people. Like people don't want to go get an education. And I think a lot of it is because these days, like you said, you can learn all these things online. There are lots of courses you can take on how to read a balance sheet. All the MBA courses, you can find them online too. So, letting people know that if you really want to be lean and also come up with your own startup, you can learn these skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually startup becomes a scale up, and then you do want to be, a CEO or a founder that is running 100 to 1,000 employees company. Those are different skills. B school does teach you some of those skills. But again, the world is full of YouTube videos and Coursera's and other ways of learning that you don't need to go to B school.
I would counterpoint. I've met plenty of MBAs who do not know how to run 100-person teams. So maybe that's a different skill set that you have to develop somewhere else.
Yeah.
But no, it's I can see how it was important in your journey to get to where you are. Was there an acceleration program affiliated with the B school?
It was an evening MBA program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but I recall you ended up getting an early pilot with a laboratory, right? Or am I misremembering?
Early,
like to demonstrate the concept.
I mean, we were working with national labs.
Okay, that's what it was. Tell us a little bit about that.
And some laboratories in the university for the demonstration.
Yeah. So tell us about that project, how you got it, where it left you. Yeah.
Well, so I mean, we need to demonstrate our technology, right? So we just knocked the doors of the labs that we knew of at the time. So one of them was my alma mater back in Utah, my PhD school, and the connections through the PhD school. And then some other national labs that we came across by, going to conferences and connections that we were able to make.
Yeah. Did you start with building like a small proof of concept, and did they test it?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we did is started a contract with the laboratory because we didn't have a lab of our own. So we started a contract with laboratories in this case, who have the expertise and the equipment to demonstrate our cycle. There was some sort of smart decision making that went into that because being bootstrapped till today, doing a demonstration is expensive. So either you dilute up front and then start a prototype development of your own, including buy some expensive machines, which you probably won't use it as you scale up to the next level. So like from, in our case, going from 100 kilowatt to a megawatt, we won't use whatever we bought for 100 kilowatt. So the smart thinking there was, how about we leverage the existing equipment in several of these laboratories and have them demonstrate our technology, which is just a contract for them. It's a good income source, sort of. And for us, it's just an OpEx expense. So that's what we did.
Okay. And if I recall, in your journey, you've also secured some grants along the way.
Right. So now we have overall $1.15 million of support from DOE in form of EarthEn dollars or lab dollars dedicated to EarthEn project.
Mm-hmm.
And that all came along with, started with Innovation Crossroads program. So this is a lab embedded entrepreneurship program funded by DOE
Mm-hmm.
Across few national labs. So this one happens to be in Oak Ridge National Lab. Now ours was a special case because when we won this grant or fellowship, we brought a new sponsor. So Office of Electricity found out about our application, and they decided to be a first-time sponsor for any company in lab and embedded entrepreneurship program. So the lab folks were happy because we brought a new sponsor. That started the overall $500K of support from DOE Office of Electricity. And on the day one of the program, we got additional support from other 3 offices, including the manufacturing offices in DOE. That was almost $650K of technology commercialization fund that went into Oak Ridge National Lab to develop a new class of heat exchanger that goes in our system with better efficiency and lower cost that EarthEn would be able to utilize in our systems. So that's the story behind 2 grants. And then left and right, we are writing more grants. We have customers, pilots committed from customers, and those customers are putting together the grants with us, the proposals for the grant.
Good.
And you have some really good news to share with us coming from New York Climate Week.
Yes. So that happened, I think, last week. Thursday, there was an event where formally it was announced that New Lab, a deep tech innovation hub out of New York, Ørsted, one of the leading energy companies in the world, huge wind developer, offshore wind developer, they put together a new studio called Futures Energy Storage Studio to help commercialize some of the best-in-class technologies out there in long-duration energy storage. And we were chosen as one of the first 5 startup to be accepted into the studio. Now so we signed an MOU with Ørsted and New Lab, and the idea here is they will be helping us with sites, potential pilot sites and demonstration sites, and will be embedded in the ecosystem in the New York that they are pulling together, including local universities like Stony Brook University and NYSERDA. So eventual success to EarthEn is our demonstration pilot in somewhere in New York.
Yeah. Does that mean you're going to be relocating to New York for a little while?
Well, maybe traveling to New York, like I've been traveling for the last 3 weeks nonstop. So we may travel, but good news is that we are moving to H-Town.
Good.
So formally, when I announced that early next year after a round, Series A round, we will be relocating ourselves to Houston.
Good. Glad to hear it. And
yes.
And why Houston? Besides the obvious.
We know why, but let's hear you say it.
Yeah, because this town is bubbling with clean energy entrepreneurship right now. If you look at Greentown, you look at Iron Building and what you all guys are doing, I mean, there's no way we can stay away from Houston. The amount of clean energy entrepreneurship that's happening and the ecosystem that's building around it is phenomenal compared to none of the cities that I have seen in the US. So earlier, we are long duration energy storage, of course, but a variant of our product can convert a CO2 pipeline into energy storage asset. So many of the oil and gas companies we were talking to as potential investors, but now they are also potential customers. So Houston just got very important, and this all happened in last quarter or so. So we made a decision that after our Series A, which is upcoming, we will move to Houston. So tomorrow on Friday, I'm actually visiting a couple of the office spaces and hunting office spaces for our move.
And where are you moving from?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's like a I don't know, little known fact. Maybe people in the industry know, but we have some of the biggest like CO2 pipelines in the country. If I remember, maybe it was 10 years ago, Kinder Morgan used to be the biggest at that. But it's that's why CCUS is so interesting here, right? Because you already know how to move the hydrocarbons, what else the carbons, right? I guess tell us a little bit about this variant on this product you've developed. So this is taking your turbo machinery and your storage system and attaching it to a pipeline.
Right. So we basically retrofit pipeline with our system. If you recall, back in the day, like when I mentioned about our technology, we were toggling from a low pressure phase of CO2 to a high pressure phase of CO2. That's the process of storing and releasing energy. The low pressure side can be swept by a pipeline because the pressure and temperatures that a low pressure tank has mimics the pressure and temperatures and the phase of CO2 in the pipelines, which means now we can use and leverage a CO2 pipeline and compress just in time when we are discharging our battery and release power. So intercepting 100 feet of pipeline and the entire mass flow rate of the CO2 in the pipeline gives you 20 megawatt of power.
Yeah,
which is phenomenal.
So just a tangent question because I'm less familiar. So obviously we have like oil storage and we have gas storage. Is there CO2 storage that exists that you could tap into?
Right. So what's happening now, more and more you are seeing these days as a CCUS hub.
Yeah.
And many of these hubs coming up with funding from DOE and elsewhere, which means now you have some sort of point capture or DAC, direct air capture of CO2, and then eventual sequestration of CO2, which oil and gas is very good at, right? Because we know how to drill. Between the DAC or the point source and the eventual destination, which could be enhanced oil recovery or sequestration, there's always a CO2 transport.
Got it.
That happens in pipelines. And that's why you have a network of pipeline already existing and more coming with the DAC, with the CCUS hubs coming in the US.
Got it.
Those pipelines can actually, with EarthEn, can be converted into an energy storage asset.
Got it.
Which means now you can have your DAC be powered by solar and wind. And at the same time, when the sun is not shining and wind is not blowing, use the pipeline converted into LDAS, energy storage, power those DAC operations when the sun and wind are not active.
Got it.
So you have clean energy powering your DAC.
Yeah, very interesting. And I don't know if we delved into it, but you have a question?
No, I was just wondering, like, have you tested that yet, or is that still like on a concept?
Right. So our cycle demonstration is happening right now. We have some data already. The cycle does not change whether you replace when you swap tank with a pipeline. On a pressure temperature plot, it's still same CO2. The molecule does not differentiate between when it's stored inside a tank or a pipeline. So the cycle demonstration that is work in progress and some of it is already done will prove both the pipeline use case and the base use case, the non-pipeline use case. But then the pilot that we are gonna do next year would be two different pilots, one for the pipeline and one for the utility scale energy storage without pipeline.
Yeah.
And this would be together with the Ørsted collaboration?
Yes, they would be part of one of these pilots at least. Yes.
Good. Fantastic. And remind me, what is it people are buying when they buy the pilot? Is it a box? Is it the equipment? How much of the system do you have to put together for them?
So, we are doing the entire end-to-end, right? So we are serving the entire product on a platter to the customer. These pilots are first of its kind pilot. We are still working with the customers on what the business model may look like in terms of them owning the asset or them just using the services off of the asset that we, EarthEn, will own. That's called PPA, Power Purchasing Agreement. That's work in progress with the customers, but it can only take one of these two forms.
So how do you define your customers right now?
We have 5 segments of customers. One of the major segment is utility scale energy storage. So all the utilities that provide electricity to you and me. Some of them do own the asset. Others like to do PPA. We are open to both. The second segment of the customers is C&I space, commercial and industrial space that require energy storage for resiliency, for cost savings, for energy arbitrage, for peak shaving use cases. Then we have CO2 pipeline. And then EV charging is also one of the customers.
Is the system reactive enough to provide like backup power, or is it not? Is that a different value proposition?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we can turn on our systems in a matter of minutes because this is a CO2 based turbine, unlike steam turbines, which can take several tens of minutes to ramp up. CO2 turbines can ramp up fairly quick because of the size. These are very small turbines because of the densities being high. So in matter of few minutes, we will be up providing the power. For certain use case, you do need like backup coming online in like few seconds.
Yeah.
And that would be, that would potentially continue to be the UPS battery, UPS for data centers. And if there are some other use cases, it will continue to be lithium ion UPS.
No, I remember
storage.
I think it was like for hospitals and things like that. They needed like a 6-second startup. And then, then they would hand off to something that was longer storage because you don't want to necessarily run your diesel recip for hours and hours if you don't have to. But I'm not sure I don't know if the state of the art allowed for that kind of handover. I remember it was something that was being talked a lot about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, so that handoff typically does happen, and then that handoff is where we come in.
Yeah, yeah.
So just curious. So suppose you're charging you call it a tank or a battery pack. What do you call it?
You just call it like CO2 battery.
CO2 battery. So you're charging your battery using solar, and then when you have to discharge it, does it have to happen right away? Because does it start losing energy once it stops charging? Do you have to use it right away, or can you just like store it and use it later?
No, you can store it and use it later. There would be some leakage of heat from the thermal side.
Yeah.
And we modeled it out to be 3% over 72 hours.
That's not bad. Like what's a lithium ion battery by comparison over that same time?
Yeah, they lose their state of the charge as well. I don't know off the top of my head what the number is. Yeah. But you can't sit on them for long.
Yeah.
And what kind of uses are you envisioning
for our systems?
For the battery? Yeah, like would it be, you mentioned EV. What do you think would be the first adopters? I
mean, so first adopters, because of the sign-off that we need from utilities, would need to be a utility. Even though it probably would be the last check that come into in our company would be from utilities because of their sales cycles being too long. However, we do need their sign-off on our technology by demonstration and pilot with them first.
Got it.
So utilities would be the first sort of company we will go and do pilot. However, the first market that we will go into would probably be sort of demand charge use case and EV battery and fleet chargings and some of the C&I space.
Oh, so this would be like supporting, so they don't have to install as much infrastructure at the charging facility itself, right?
Right. So basically demand charge, if you have all of your EV chargers being hooked to car at one point, that you are now using the peak power, and that peak power is what you will pay for rest of your month or even more than month.
And that's more of a California phenomenon, or is that something that happens here in Texas?
I'm not sure about the Texas, but several states have this demand charge. Okay. And so you want to reduce like EV charging, and fleet owners for the EV chargers want to reduce that demand charge. So for example, they would have 6 cars be charged directly from the grid, but then the rest 6, if they happen to come at the same time, can be charged from the stored energy.
Got it. Got it. Yeah.
Would the scale be different for like utilities versus like EV, or are you thinking
the scales would be different? Yes. So all these utilities are all 10 megawatt and up, 50 megawatt. The EV space and the C&I space is all about 1 to 5 megawatt. And even smaller, but as a turbo machinery, we don't want to go small, so we start with 1.
Yeah. Right. It's, with all these rapid charging where everyone wants to charge in 10 minutes, it's like you forget how much power is actually needed to do that.
And it's actually not good for your battery.
Well, I
Or
think that's what they're
yeah.
trying to solve, right?
Yeah.
Is to make it so it doesn't
Yeah.
burn out the battery, but
Yeah.
it really just puts a strain on the grid infrastructure and that peak charge, especially if you have everyone pull in at the same time.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And then the back end, so behind the meter
Mm-hmm.
and in front of the meter, there are use cases in EV charging both, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for utilities, they want to make sure that if all the EVs are hooked up at the same time, there is still a balance in the consumption and the generation, because grid needs to be balanced at all times.
Yeah.
Right. So for them, it's more about making sure that they have that capacity to sustain so many EVs coming online.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to just shift a little bit and talk about your fundraising journey. So it seems like we talked about grants and grant programs you pulled in. Have you been bootstrapped the entire time through today?
So prize money, a lot of competitions that we won,
mm-hmm.
like pretty much most competitions we go to, we end up winning.
Yeah.
So that helped us stay afloat. A pre-seed round with friends and family,
mm-hmm.
That helped us. And then every credit card that you can think of has been used
mm-hmm.
in EarthEn.
Yep.
Business line of credit
mm-hmm.
has been used in EarthEn. That all on top of the DOE money
mm-hmm.
and some of we also won the Cal Seed Award.
What is that?
Cal Seed is basically for people with use case in California
mm-hmm.
and belonging to California. CEC, California Energy Commission, has this program called Cal Seed, California Seed Money, basically.
Okay.
So we won that as well recently. It was announced a few weeks back. So all these non-dilutive grants and other means of non-dilutive financing, such as credit cards and friends and family, kept us afloat. The time has come.
Yeah.
When we need to raise. What just happened is over last 2 quarters or so is that now we have pilots and we need to deliver on these pilots.
Yeah.
So this is our first raise, but because of the sum of the money is little on the high end, $30 million or so, it does not qualify as a seed round. So we're going to call it Series A.
Yep.
And I just, in my mind, we call it first raise, and people may want to call it Series A.
Yeah. No, I think it's very realistic. Like, this is what it takes to build something like this, is $30 million. And you've done a lot with not raising capital. So I was very impressed kind of seeing you again ahead of the Rice Energy Venture Forum. And I think I met Karthik over there as well. You guys made so much progress, and I'm amazed how scrappy the team is. And you've been very efficient with the capital. And I hope investors who see what you're doing with it, it's very purposeful. And in some ways, if you want to go fast, $30 million is not enough, right? Especially if you think about all the capacity we have to bring on. But you got to do one step at a time. So you got to get those pilots out before you can go off and really start deploying product, right?
Yeah, because a Series B will entail manufacturing.
Yeah.
And will entail building a big factory.
Yeah.
Somewhere in Texas or somewhere else. So that would be a big Series B round.
Yeah.
The Series A purpose is delivering on the pilots, growing the team, and the other 1/3 will go towards R&D. We will be continuing on R&D to reduce the cost of our systems and increase the efficiencies of our system.
Yeah.
To meet the DOE cost targets and be market competitive at all times as we go from now until 2030 and beyond.
Yeah. In MBA school, do they call that value engineering?
I think so.
No. In the like defense industry, it would always call it like, we got to get value out of it. Like, we're just reducing costs, guys. Why can't we call it that? But
yeah, I just call this cost reduction R&D.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, being bootstrapped had its own pros and cons. I think sometimes we had to figure out for every travel how do we get funds for this. At the same time, it did allow us to stay lean and taught us how to stay lean, which is going to come handy because we, at EarthEn, we exit by IPO. That's a long haul.
Yeah.
And we will have to continue lean all the way through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the best practices that we have now learned will help us.
Yeah. And when you look at the Series B, when do you think you'll be able to bring a product to market? in kind of like an alpha beta configuration.
Yeah, so these first of its kind demonstration that we are right now doing the pre-feed, so pre-front end engineering design, and then we'll kick off formally the feed studies and the construction next year. These will deliver first of its kind demonstration of our product, and that would be at TRL all the way 7 or 8. So then the next thing in the Series B would be basically building the assembly facility and the manufacturing facility to deliver on the contracts that we will have from the customers. So Series B will allow us to deliver at scale to the contracts that we will gather by then.
Yeah.
So when you say, first commercial product in the market, we are looking at 2026 and 7 range.
Yeah. Not that far away.
No, it's not bad actually.
Yeah. And a lot of that's because the turbo machinery technology is pretty mature and all the components, if I remember.
They are, but supercritical CO2 is a different beast altogether. So steam turbines and other turbines are very mature. However, the expertise lie within these companies and the OEMs to deliver supercritical CO2 turbo machinery as well. So we are working with tier 1 OEMs who have the expertise to deliver these systems, supercritical CO2 systems for us.
Cool. Good.
I think again, to like piggyback on what Jason was saying, I think it's EarthEn is a great role model for other companies also in the same journey and thinking versus, VC investment versus bootstrapping, and that you can do it, especially when it's for something that you're building that's so capital intensive. But at the same time, knowing that there are lots of grants available, there are lots of labs that you could use and really have that lean mentality.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that.
It was at one point, it was a chicken and the egg problem that, okay, we have to build something and then the investment will come, but then how do we build because it's so capital intensive? But then, the climate change is going to take everyone's help. And when you ask for help, people are there to help.
Yeah.
Right. So what we came across is we leverage partnerships to deliver this proof of the concept while staying lean.
Yeah.
And then once you have done it, now the investments would be easier.
Yeah. You're in a good position now because you can show that you can stay lean, you can be responsible, and you have a proof of concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have a personal climate impact story to share with us?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I was born and brought up in India, one of the remote locations. And, when the power was out, which was very often the case, you would see power outages. The smallest homes and the houses were typically the darkest. So, what I realized when I was a child that, that there is a disparity in how electrons are consumed. There's it's not, everybody is not getting an equitable share of their electrons in this world. And when you look at electrons and electricity, I mean, after your food, shelter, and clothes, this is the 4th basic necessity of human life. When you have a power outage, everything just stands still. Your iPhones will start to, discharge. Your ACs go down. You can't do anything. In 21st century, electricity is, I would say, more critical than some of the other things like food, shelter, and home, and clothes. So I think fair and equitable distribution of electrons to everybody who needs it in a clean, green, and a resilient way, wherever they are, is very important. And that's what the motto of the company is. My other co-founder, who is the CTO, he did not see electricity until he went to college. So, we came from the background where we understand not having electrons is not nice. Everybody should have access to clean, green electrons whenever they need it, wherever they need it. And that's why EarthEn is not just an energy storage company, but we are actually enabling all pathways of electrification. Our vision is to electrify the globe. We are an electrification company. So we are starting off with our energy storage product, to enable solar and wind so that you can have 24/7 access to clean electrons. However, our supercritical CO2 cycle that we have developed allows us to enable other pathways of electrification, which includes nuclear, because nuclear produces heat, and one of the best ways of converting heat to electrons, electricity, is through a power cycle or a supercritical CO2 based power cycle, which is what we do. Green hydrogen, running hydrogen production in the nighttime through our stored energy, and then eventually geothermal, where you're producing baseload power using CO2 as the fluid. We will enable all pathways of electrification because the end goal is to see clean electrons going everywhere.
Good. Oh, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. It's a powerful mission.
Yeah. So we're thinking about you coming to Houston, and I know you've been coming for a while. What are some things that excite you about Houston outside of like the customer base in terms of the startup ecosystem here?
I mean, it's great. I mean, when I've been to some of the Greentown events and the ION events, the people, the network, and just the energy knowledge that exists in this town is phenomenal. You can't compare it with anything else outside Houston. Everybody understands energy. They speak the language of energy. Either it's fossil and now it's clean. As a town, I think it has done a phenomenal job in converting from the oil and gas capital to the clean energy capital. I think I've seen it over the last 2 to 3 years that's happening. Some other thing that I like about is, which I was exposed recently to, is the tunnel network that you guys have.
Yes.
I was hunting for office space, and the realtor was like, so you can just go down one level and you can have all the restaurants. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I did not know that. I think I've heard of it, but I really never witnessed it. Then I went one level down, and it was, wow, there's a tunnel that connects all the downtowns, and like all the fancy restaurants and the nice restaurants where you want to eat are there.
To be clear, this is because Houstonians don't want to go outside where it's hot. And this is all about keeping the AC going while you're trying to go around downtown.
Which is something I really appreciate coming from Phoenix.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So I think overall, great weather, great for building a company, investors, ecosystem, fellow entrepreneurs, and folks like IONS and Greentown Labs. I think it's just no-brainer for a company like EarthEn to be in Houston, but not anywhere else. Yeah.
So what was Houston missing that maybe didn't draw you in sooner?
I think it was us not being ready rather than Houston. So we saw the growth and the maturity of Houston as a clean tech capital. So that's definitely one thing that has, over time, it's becoming more and more clean energy capital of the world, if you will. At the same time, EarthEn's maturity was not there for us to move as a company. So now I think both are happening. Houston is growing, and EarthEn is growing too. It feels like the right time to do this.
Good.
Yeah, we like to hear that.
Yep.
And we want more talent and more startups to come to Houston. So I'm glad you're going to be here in town now.
Right. And truth be told, Rice Alliance did a phenomenal job in exposing us to the Houston ecosystem, because we've been coming to Houston for almost every Rice Alliance events. We were announced 2 times in a row, most promising companies in their venture day. And when we come to Rice Alliance, we talk to the investors and all the ecosystem players in the networking event. So good job there for the Rice Alliance. I want to call out that. But now we are more than convinced to be here.
Good. No, the Rice Alliance runs some of the best events for like the investor networking. I'm always impressed how well put together it is, and without a hitch. At least it seems to us from the outside.
Yeah, and it all started with us being part of, when I was in B school, part of the Rice Alliance business school competition. B plan competition, which is one of the good ones.
The biggest ones.
And then finally we were part of their clean tech accelerator. So it kind of came in full circle.
No, they've been doing a good job really anchoring the ecosystem here in Houston. So good.
Yeah. What is the one thing our audience could do to support you on your goals?
I think I'm just people. I want to talk to more people, get to know more people in Houston. We are coming here, so please, we'll reach out, and if you see us, talk to us. We'll talk to you.
You haven't found office space yet, have you?
No,
No.
HETI, they are helping us find
Good.
one. So there's a meeting tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
But we'll be here soon.
Mm.
Talking to people, making more connections, making more connections in the ecosystem, investors, customers, especially the pipeline customers. There's a very new segment for us. That's all something we look forward to.
And how can they reach out?
My email, very easy, Manas, MANAS at EarthEn.energy, or just LinkedIn me. Probably the top two guys you will find when you look me up in LinkedIn.
Yeah, we'll add your contact details in the show notes so
Yep.
people can easily get in touch.
Yes.
Good. Well, thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Phenomenal. I appreciate time.
Yeah.
And, just great job that you all are doing for Houston. I think it speaks volume for people outside Houston, and that helps people outside Houston come to Houston and see the ecosystem firsthand. So thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.